Grab your wine glasses, ladies and gents, because today's video is brought to you by Bright Cellars. They're going to send wine directly to your door. What could be better than that? So look, if you're like me, you probably like discovering new wines to drink and enjoy, and that's precisely what Bright Cellars does so well for you. They scour the globe looking for hidden gems across many of the small vineyards that line the Italian countryside or the South American highlands. And Bright Cellars maximize the chances that you're going to love the wine they send to you by providing you with a super short 7-question quiz about what you like. No snobbery, very accessible, and they show you a list of wines from around the world that you're most likely to enjoy based on your responses. Obviously. When you're done, Bright Cellars sends you your wine with a guarantee that you'll like them, and if you don't, they'll ship you another bottle with your next delivery. Brilliant! You really can't lose! And what else? You can also choose how much they send, and of course it's delivered to wherever you want it to go, making everything super easy. Each box is recyclable with a low footprint and features wine education cards, so you can learn a bit about what you're drinking, like how you might correctly pair it with foods or what temperature it's best served at. They will also occasionally do little flash sales that are very cool. For instance, a couple of months ago, they emailed about a broken label sale where you could grab 12 bottles of wine at a ridiculously low price, all because the labels were a little bit ripped or something. Still great wine, making an amazing deal. Right now, Bright Cellars is giving you guys 50% off your first 6-bottle box. That's $55 for 6 great bottles, which is a crazy good deal. Follow the link in the description below and get started today. And now today's video. In a classic action movie scenario, our hero, pursued by gun-toting baddies, finds themselves cornered at the end of a long pier. With nowhere to run, they leap into the sea and swim to the bottom as the baddies let loose a lethal hail of bullets. Unfortunately for our villains, the water proves an effective shield, their bullets penetrating only a few feet before stopping dead and tumbling harmlessly to the sea floor, leaving our hero unscathed. Fooled by their foes' iron lungs, the baddies soon give up and drive away, leaving our hero to fight another day. But while this simple tactic has appeared in countless films, television shows, and video games, would it really work in real life? Are a few feet of water all it takes to stop a modern high-powered rifle round? And what actually happens when you fire a gun into water, or for that matter, underwater? Well, grab your red hat, your Speedo, and your Glock as we dive into, literally, the fascinating world at the intersection of water and firearms. Surprisingly, one of the best datasets available on what happens to bullets fired into water comes courtesy of those legendary purveyors of televised mayhem, Adam Savage and Jamie Heineman, better known as the MythBusters. In an episode airing on July the 13th, 2005, the dynamic duo tested the bulletproof properties of water against a variety of common firearms, ranging from a 9mm automatic pistol to a 50 caliber BMG anti-material rifle. These tests were conducted by placing a block of ballistics gel, which simulates human flesh, at various depths in a swimming pool and discharging the firearms at an angle into the surface of the water. The results of these experiments are surprising. At a range of 7 feet or 2.13 meters, the 9mm handgun was able to inflict lethal through-and-through wounds on the ballistic gel. At 8 feet or 2.43 meters, the bullet entered but did not exit the gel, while beyond 8 feet, the gel was unharmed, the bullet having lost too much kinetic energy to penetrate. While intuition would suggest that more powerful rounds would penetrate more water, strangely, the opposite turned out to be true. In fact, nearly all rounds more powerful than 9mm, including 223, 306, and 50 BMG, either lost nearly all of their energy after only a few feet or disintegrated entirely on impact, breaking up into a shower of harmless, low-energy fragments. Against all expectations, the MythBusters discovered that the supposedly laughable action movie cliché was actually quite accurate, and that diving around 5 feet or about 1.5 meters below the surface is sufficient to protect oneself from most modern firearms. This is especially true if the firearm is fired into the water at an angle, as this increases the effective distance that the bullets must travel. So, Hollywood actually got something right for once. Who knew? But what's going on here? Why does a less powerful round travel farther through water than a more powerful one? The explanation for this apparently counterintuitive behavior lies in the drag equation, which calculates the opposing force experienced by an object as it travels through a fluid. According to this equation, the drag on an object is proportional to the cross-sectional area of the object, the density of the fluid it's traveling through, the square of the object's velocity, and a dimensionless factor called the drag coefficient, which is related to the object's shape. Of particular interest to us here are the effects of density and velocity. Fresh water is 800 times times denser than air, meaning a bullet traveling through water experiences 800 times more drag force. And thanks to the velocity squared term in the drag equation, this effect increases exponentially as the velocity of the round rises. For example, a typical 9mm parabellum has a muzzle velocity of around 1,180 feet per second or 360 meters per second, while a .223 caliber or 5.56mm round travels at around 3,240 feet per second or 990 meters per second, nearly 3 times faster, meaning it will experience around 9 times the drag force. This dramatic increase in drag causes the bullet to rapidly lose energy and velocity, rendering it all but harmless after only a few feet. It also places the bullet, which is composed of little more than lead alloy covered in a thin copper jacket, under significant stress, causing many to disintegrate upon impact. This means, counterintuitively, that if you want to shoot at someone underwater, you are better off using a less powerful weapon. However, you had better pray for a lucky shot, for as the MythBusters experiments also revealed, even the highly penetrating 9mm rounds behaved erratically upon entering the water, veering wildly off course and often missing the ballistics gel target. This is because bullets are optimized for use in air, as we shall see. Making a bullet stable and accurate in water does require a very different ballistic shape. Okay, so that covers firing guns into water. What about firing guns underwater? Will your trusty Glock still function when waterlogged? Well, yes and no. As discussed in our previous video, has anyone ever fired a gun in space, the propellant powder used in firearms cartridges contains its own source of oxygen, meaning that cartridges will work just fine in oxygen-free environments such as underwater or even in the vacuum of space. Furthermore, most modern cartridges are sufficiently sealed and weatherproofed so that they can be carried down at least a few meters underwater without leaking. Where the problem starts, however, is with the firearms themselves, which, like their ammunition, are optimized for use in air. Water, as previously discussed, is 800 times denser and 55 times more viscous than air, meaning that the various moving parts within an auto-loading firearm, such as the hammer, firing pin, slide bolt, and gas piston, depending on the type of firearm, will be subjected to significantly higher drag force. This may impede these parts from moving with enough velocity or completing their full operating cycle, leading to various malfunctions such as failure of the hammer or firing pin to strike the cartridge primer with sufficient force, or failure of the bolt to fully cycle. This means that, at best, the gun will likely only fire once before having to be manually recocked. At worst, it just might not fire at all. However, there is at least one kind of repeating handgun whose mechanism is not affected by water resistance: the humble revolver, which relies on mechanical energy from the shooter's finger to rotate the cylinder from round to round. But lest you think you can bring your trusty 6-shooter to a Wild West-style showdown with Aquaman, unfortunately, the problems with firing a gun underwater don't stop with merely cycling the action. To begin with, the moment you submerge a firearm, the barrel will immediately fill with water that the bullet has to push out of its way on the way out. This added resistance massively increases the chamber pressure, placing strain on the firearm's chamber and action and potentially damaging the action, or even worse, causing the firearm to explode in your hand. But even if you are lucky and the firearm supposedly fires without exploding, you still have to contend with the same problem as with firing it into the water: massively increased drag. Thankfully, you will have one physical phenomenon on your side, and that is supercavitation. Cavitation occurs when the local water pressure near the surface of a fast-moving object, for example a spinning boat propeller, becomes so low that the water vaporizes, forming bubbles of water vapor. These bubbles typically collapse almost immediately, producing a violent water hammer effect that can destroy a metal propeller within months. When a bullet is fired through water, a sheath of supercavitating vapor forms around it, pushing away the surrounding water. This reduces the skin friction and allows the bullet to travel faster. The same effect is used by the Russian rocket-propelled VA-111 Shkval torpedo, which, by generating a supercavitating bubble using its specially designed nose cone, can reach a blistering speed of 250 knots or 460 kilometers per hour, nearly 4 times faster than the next fastest NATO torpedo. And for more on another insane vehicle that allegedly uses the technology, please do check out our previous video, the curious case of the 200-mile-per-hour personal jet submarine. However, just as on the surface of a propeller, this supercavitating bubble very quickly collapses, causing drag to rapidly increase and the bullet to quickly lose energy and velocity. And the deeper below the surface the bullet is fired, and thus the higher the water pressure, the faster the bubble will collapse. This means that even the most powerful cartridge will become non-lethal after only a couple of meters, a phenomenon dramatically demonstrated in 2016 by Norwegian physicist Andreas Wahl. In a series of seemingly death-defying experiments, Wahl stood in a swimming pool less than 3 meters away away from a variety of firearms, including a .223 caliber rifle, and, using a string to pull the trigger, fired them directly at his own unshielded body. As predicted, the bullets almost immediately came to a halt and fell harmlessly to the bottom of the pool, leaving the intrepid scientist unharmed. But even if Weil had been within the lethal range of these underwater bullets, the chances of any of them hitting him would have been relatively low. This is because the rifling-induced spin used to stabilize bullets fired in air is quickly overwhelmed by the greater hydrodynamic forces exerted by the water, causing them to veer wildly from their original trajectory. Based on this, you may be tempted to think that the ocean is the ultimate gun-free zone and that Aquaman was right to bring a trident to your underwater gunfight. But you would be wrong, for thanks to some clever engineering, several nations have succeeded in developing firearms that work perfectly well in the briny deep. During the Cold War, both NATO and the Eastern Bloc raised elite teams of combat divers to infiltrate enemy naval bases and carry out reconnaissance or acts of sabotage. In response, both sides also trained counter-divers to defend their ports against enemy attack. At first, these divers were armed with little more than combat knives and the occasional spear gun. However, these weapons had limited range and proved less effective against enemy divers who wore reinforced helmets, wetsuits, and harnesses and traveled in hard plastic and metal swimmer delivery vehicles or wet subs. In response, in 1971, Soviet weapons designers Vladimir Simonov, Pyotr Sazonov, and Oleg Kravchenko developed the SPP-1, a pistol specifically designed for use underwater. 244mm long and weighing around 1 kilogram, the pistol features 4 Derringer-style barrels fired in sequence by each trigger pull. As ordinary bullets are inaccurate underwater, the weapon is chambered for the specially designed 4.5 by 40mm round, which fires a 115mm long dart-like projectile. These projectiles are stabilized by hydrodynamic forces, meaning that SPP-1's barrels are unrifled. The cartridge also features a sliding piston that can trap propellant gas inside the cartridge casing and prevents the gun from producing a cloud of bubbles when fired. Accepted for use by Soviet frogmen in 1975, in testing the SPP-1 proved capable of penetrating a padded dry suit or 5mm glass faceplate at a range of 17 meters at 5 meters in depth. This performance, however, dropped dramatically with depth, with the effective range at a depth of 40 meters being only 6 meters. Wanting a more powerful, longer-range weapon, in 1975, Vladimir Simonov developed an underwater rifle called the Avtomat Podvodny Spetsialny, or Special Underwater Automatic Rifle, better known as the APS. Like the SPP-1, the APS fires long, dart-like projectiles, in this case the 5.45 by 120mm round, stored in an extended 26-round magazine. To allow the weapon to fire reliably underwater, the action was extensively modified through the addition of more powerful springs and additional space around the bolt and other moving parts to allow them to more easily overcome the increased water resistance. At a depth of 5 meters, the APS has an effective range of 30 meters, nearly twice that of the SPP-1. However, like the SPP, the APS's ammunition is designed exclusively for use underwater, making it extremely inaccurate when fired on land. The weapon is also bulky and awkward, its large slab-sided magazine making it difficult to swing around underwater. For this and other reasons, many Soviet Spetsnaz or Special Forces troops abandoned the weapon in favor of carrying an SPP-1 pistol for use underwater and a regular AK rifle for use on land. Meanwhile, several NATO countries were also developing their own underwater guns. Among the first was the M1 Underwater Defense Gun, or UDG, developed by the United States in the mid-1970s. Similar to the SPP-1, the UDG was a Derringer-style multi-barrel weapon that fired elongated dart-like cartridges. The cartridges also featured captive pistons to prevent propellant gas from escaping the weapon. However, the UDG boasted 6 barrels to the SPP-1's 4. While effective, the weapon was not well received by American Special Forces operatives. As Tom Hawkins of the Naval Special Warfare Foundation explains, it was bulky and heavy and the men never warmed up to it. It was also a signature-controlled item, as in signing your name to check it out, and administratively the burden to the operational units. Consequently, in 1976, the M1 was replaced by the P11, developed by German weapons manufacturer Heckler & Koch. Developed for Germany's Army combat divers, the P11 more closely resembles a child's toy than a serious firearm. Its 5 fixed barrels contained in a bulky all-polymer case. Also unique among underwater firearms, the P11's cartridges are electrically rather than mechanically fired, using a battery stored in the grip. It also cannot be reloaded in the field, and once expended, the weapons must be returned to the manufacturer to have its 5-round barrel cluster replaced. Yet, despite these design eccentricities, the P11 is reportedly highly effective, with a lethal range of 50 meters at a depth of 5 meters. In addition to Germany, the pistol has been used by the Special Forces of the UK, the US, the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, and Israel. Israel. In response to the deficiencies of the original APS underwater rifle, in 1991, designer Yuri Danilov of the Russian Tula Artillery Engineering Institute set about developing a new rifle that was just as effective out of the water as under it. The result was the ASM-DT amphibious rifle, which can fire the same 5.45 by 120mm round as the APS, as well as the 5.45 by 39mm round used in standard Russian combat rifles. The magazine while automatically adjusting between the two different styles of magazine. The gas system also automatically adjusts for use in water or air, while the barrel is rifled to allow greater accuracy when firing on the surface. However, the rifling is shallower than on regular rifles, allowing the water to more easily pass around the bullet and preventing the barrel from bursting in case it's fired before it's fully drained. But while the ASMDT was officially adopted by Russian forces in the year 2000, it is not the ultimate evolution in underwater firearms design. That honor belongs to the ADS, designed the same year as the ASMDT's adoption. A futuristic-looking rifle with a bullpup configuration, that is, the action and magazine are located behind the trigger, the ADS does away with the bulky dart-like projectiles used by the APS and ASMDT in favor of the more compact 5.45 by 39mm PSP cartridge. Based on the 5.45 by 39mm cartridge, but featuring a projectile specially shaped for speed and accuracy underwater, the PSP is designed to fit in the same magazines used by the standard Russian-issue AK-74 rifle. That means that a soldier can easily switch between magazines of underwater and above-water ammunition, making the ADS far more convenient and flexible to use than any of its predecessors. Officially adopted in 2013, the ADS is currently in service with Russian Naval and Army Special Forces. So, in conclusion, if you ever find yourself pursued by gun-toting adversaries, then, for once, you can absolutely follow Hollywood's advice and dive into the nearest ocean or lake for protection. But if by some astronomical coincidence your adversaries happen to be a squad of Russian naval frogmen, then I'm afraid you're out of luck. And just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water.